Hello and welcome. Tonight, federal government debunks claim of lack of adequate storage capacity to receive COVID-19 vaccines, says available facility has capacity to store up to 400,000 doses. Governor Sanwo-Olu promises to scale up oxygen supply in the isolation centres in the state to meet the rising demand, appeals to residents to submit themselves for COVID-19 tests if they feel unwell. Calls mount for extension of deadline for the National Identity Number registration as the time for linkage of NIN to SIM card expires today. And US President-elect gives final address in his home of Delaware before leaving for Washington ahead of his swearing in as president tomorrow. Plus, we'll have business, sports, and later on international news from our studios in London.
On business news tonight, non-oil tax revenue beats expectation as Federal Inland Revenue Service meets 98% of its target in 2020.
And on sports news tonight, European champions Bayern Munich face either Al Duhail or Al Ahly in the FIFA Club World Cup semi-final.
And from Abuja, 3 people dead after a fuel tanker exploded on Ibrahim Babangida Boulevard in Abeokuta, the Ogun state capital.
Ahead of the keenly expected delivery of the initial 100,000 doses of the COVID-19 vaccine, the federal government is giving assurances that it has the capacity to effectively store up to 400,000 doses of the vaccine through the newly acquired ultra-cold chain facility in Abuja. The executive director of the National Primary Healthcare Development Agency, Faisal Shuabu, said this while debunking claims that Nigeria is not prepared to receive the COVID-19 vaccines. He disclosed that preliminary talks have commenced with other countries, such as Russia, China and India, to procure vaccines that are less dependent on cooling facilities. Our correspondent Gloria Umezuki reports.
3 freshly acquired ultra-cold chain equipment at the National Strategic Cold Store in Abuja in preparation for the arrival of the first set of 100,000 COVID-19 vaccines from Pfizer in the next 2 to 3 weeks. At a facility tour, the executive director of the National Primary Healthcare Development Agency, Dr. Faisal Shuabu, underscores that 50,000 persons will be beneficiaries of the initial tranche, including frontline health workers, the elderly, traditional and religious leaders.
As long as we keep the vaccines in the ultra cold chain, yes, they will continue to be potent. But once they leave the ultra cold chain, they can last only for about 5 days in normal refrigerators of +2 to +8. The total capacity that we have here is 2,100 liters. So what it means is that what we have here can take a little over 400,000 doses of the Pfizer vaccine.
The ultra-cold chain can only be open for about 2 minutes at a time because a drop in temperature can hugely compromise the potency of this vaccine. Nigeria expects the Pfizer vaccine 100,000 doses within the next few weeks in the country. The 300,000 doses of Pfizer vaccine is made possible through the COVAX facility, which is a global platform with 190 participating countries, including Nigeria, to provide vaccines for poor countries. Nigeria equally seeks to procure additional vaccines enough to meet the target of vaccinating 70% of Nigeria's population.
We will be focusing more on those vaccines that do not require this kind of complicated cold chain mechanisms, right? So the Oxford AstraZeneca types of vaccine that require +2 to +8 degrees Celsius are what we're going to be focusing on. We're having multiple engagements with African Union, with the Russians around the Sputnik V vaccine, with the Chinese, with the Indians. So all those options are on the table. We want to get vaccines as fast as possible to Nigeria. Even before they are utilized, we're going to be looking at their certification by stringent regulatory authorities.
Even though budgetary allocations for vaccine procurements remain unclear, the federal government hopes that the ultra-cold chain facility will quell doubts about Nigeria's efforts towards procuring the COVID-19 vaccines. Gloria Umezuke, Channels Television News.
In the meantime, the Lagos State Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu is asking those who feel unwell and have malaria symptoms to submit themselves for a COVID-19 test. The governor stated this during a briefing on the COVID-19 situation in the state at the Lagos House, Alausa, Ikeja. He also explained that COVID-19 patients are in dire need of oxygen for survival and promised that more oxygen plants will be built.
Our oxygen strategy. The increase in the positivity of cases has necessitated the provision of a greater amount of concentrated oxygen for the moderate to severe cases on admission at the isolation centers. Over the last few weeks, the demand for oxygen has risen from 70 bottles of 60-liter cylinder per day to as high as 350 6-liter cylinder at only our Yaba mainland hospital. This is projected to even double, as we're expecting that we might have a need to up to 700 6-liter cylinders before the middle of February, towards the end of January into the middle of February. In addition to providing oxygen at our isolation center, the state government has decentralized the availability of oxygen across the state through the provision of 10 oxygen and sampling kiosks. This oxygen therapy and other related services will be provided to patients that require them. I'm glad to let you know that 5 of these 10 centers have been commissioned, whilst the remaining 5 will be ready within the next 3 to 4 weeks. And of course, it's important for us to mention that the 5 that has been commissioned are inside the MCC at Etiosa, the MCC at Alimosho. They are purpose-built oxygen triage centers at Koka Aguda Primary Health Center, at Mushi General Hospital, and Isolo General Hospital. It is our expectation that this sampling kiosk will be easily accessible to residents that require oxygen therapy at the level of the local government and a stabilization point prior to their onward transmission to our isolation center if required. This strategy is to further increase our fighting chance of Lagos residents that have contacted the virus and require oxygen therapy.
Well, the second wave of COVID-19 is necessitating the renewal of safety measures at different institutions to allow daily activities continue without endangering lives. And now that some schools are reopening across the country, the National Youth Service Corps orientation camps nationwide are also following suit. Our correspondent Dare Do visited the Iyanokbaja Lagos orientation camp and now reports.
The National Youth Service Corps NYSC has reopened camp for the 2020 Batch B Stream 2 Corps members amid concerns of the second wave of COVID-19. We are here to observe the safety protocols in place for prospective Corps members who will be spending weeks at this orientation camp. Non-pharmaceutical protocols first, but that cannot be enough. No one goes into the camp without taking the COVID-19 test. We take the slightly discomforting but necessary step. Given a clean bill, we proceed to film. There are restrictions on showing the Corps members on camera, but we caught up with the process of disinfecting their luggage as they wait to get tested.
apart from the testing that's done initially, like I said, we have the IPC guys around, and so they're constantly checking, and we ask randomly in case, because it's possible that people can develop symptoms as well while on camp. So we have people on ground to make sure that we are constantly liaising with everybody on camp to make sure that there is a community responsibility.
Less than 30% of the usual capacity is mobilized to camp. They've also been scheduled in streams for ease of compliance with the COVID-19 protocol. The buzz and energy that usually radiates at the orientation camp appears to be missing. At the registration point, officials have few files to attend to. The processes have been segmented.
We wouldn't want to have an upsurge at the registration point, even right at the gate. And so they have sectioned them. Maximum we have reporting in a day here is just 200, or even less than that. And all of them will not come at the same time. And this is to give room for us to have enough space to attend to them individually so that there will not be any congestion.
The NYSC management believes it has tidied all loose ends with various COVID-19 interventions, and there is no cause for alarm as corps members report to different orientation camps across the country. Dari Ido, Channels Television News.
The deadline for the linking of the national identity number to mobile phone SIMs expires today, but many Nigerians are still caught up in the registration process. For this reason, many of the prospective enrollees are demanding an extension of the deadline. In Lagos, the applicants are complaining about the tough time they go through, while others still find it difficult to come to terms with the payment of 15,000 naira to correct errors on their cards.
Panic, tiredness, and anguish. These are what you can see on the faces of these Nigerians at the Lagos office of NYSC as the deadline for the NIN SIM card linkage elapses. In the heat of the moment, amid the wait and struggle, this man seen here talking to the entrance keeper isn't wearing his face mask properly, thereby causing a grave danger to everyone around him. Not only that, there is no adherence to social distancing and other COVID-19 protocols. Only few people are seen wearing their face masks.
From the gate up down to this place, I know what I passed through before they could even allow me enter. It is, if you go outside and see the crowd in the gates, everybody's just like, even the ones that has, nobody knows who has disease and who does not have disease. You just contact everything, which is not nice. The stages are very, very stressful. The stages are very, very stressful. I will not lie. They need to work on this. This is not the way. Just go to other developed countries. You cannot see this kind of crowd trying to get an important identity card or whatever. You can't get this kind of crowd. It's not nice.
To many, the registration process is viewed as a cumbersome procedure, and many are already calling on the federal government to extend the deadline to enable Nigerians complete the NIN registration.
This thing is not normal. You are just suffering every day by day. Now I have been booked, everything has been corrected. I pay 15,161 naira 25 kobo for only changing of date of birth. That I was not the one that made that mistake. That was not the one that made that same mistake. I paid the money, got into this place. You need to queue and be booked for like 3 weeks. I've been coming here. This is the third week. After everything, after the registration and everything, they will now book me for another day. I will come in 6 weeks' time to collect the original copy. It's not the main ID card, the original copy.
The NIN registration process, which commenced in December, according to the government, is aimed at improving integrity and transparency of SIM registration processes and consolidate records of Nigerians.
In part 2, after the break, we have more on the NIN registration, plus the controversy over the nation's capacity for COVID-19 vaccine storage. And we'll be joined by the Executive Director of the National Primary Health Care Development Agency, Dr. Faisal Shuaibu. That's in a moment. Please join us again. Welcome back. If you've just joined us, you're watching the news at 10 on Channels Television, coming to you live from Lagos. A reminder of our top stories. Federal government says it has facility with adequate storage capacity to receive up to 400,000 doses of COVID-19 vaccines. Governor Sanwo-Olu promises to scale up oxygen supply to the isolation centres in the state to meet rising demand, appeals to residents to submit themselves for COVID-19 tests if they feel unwell. Calls mount for extension of deadline for the National Identity Number registration as the time for linkage of NIN to SIM cards expires today. And US President-elect gives final address in his state of Delaware before leaving for Washington ahead of his swearing in as president tomorrow. I was still talking about the NIN registration, this time in the nation's capital, where the same demand for a deadline extension is being made by prospective enrollees. According to them, a large number of people are yet to link their numbers to their SIM cards, and many are still trying to get registered. Others are accusing the Commission of preferential treatment in the registration process.
Large crowds at enrollment centres is now a norm. The scene is the same across the Federal Capital Territory. The crowd inside the centre is almost the same as outside. Many hang around in groups, anxiously waiting to be called in.
Has your account been blocked?
Most of those who registered their displeasure call for an extension of time. They also frowned at the non-adherence to COVID-19 protocols, especially social distancing.
If you had come earlier, you will see the mammoth crowd gathering here with one of the NYSC staff standing on the podium and addressing us as if he's addressing a political rally. Then the question is this. For Christ's sake, this is a pandemic era. All governments of the world over are advising their citizens to keep social distancing, to be at home and the rest. And our own government is asking us to gather in a public square and you understand, to register for what? NYSC. In the 21st century, the IT era, the government want to kill all of us. They called us, invited us into the public and gathered us like sardines, like bags of rice loaded in a warehouse because they want us to register for NYSC. It's unfair.
Most people left their offices, left their businesses to come here and get their cards. And look at what is happening. The place is crowded, even with the COVID. Everybody is standing here. Nothing is happening. I mean, it's frustrating.
What I'm expecting them to do is just to extend the date, because we have not gotten anything yet. If they end it today, that means most of us will just go home empty-handed without having anything. If government will please help us to extend this thing, we'll be very happy.
They complain about what they call preferential treatment for top government officials, which is making it difficult for them to be registered.
They will tell everybody to go, but you begin to see VIP people are coming inside doing and they will be going, doing and be going. If you can wait, you will see to your eyes. Now, my mother has been crying since morning. Up to now, she have not done. And I don't even know what to do because I don't have somebody to call inside the office. But if you have anybody in the office to call, you will be able to enter inside. I don't know why.
As the deadline for the registration of subscribers with NIN and those without looms, it is expected by many that the authorities will ensure that these enrollees do not get their lines blocked.
And despite the hiccups in the registration process, the Nigerian Communications Commission says it's received 47.8 million national identity numbers from telecommunications companies to enable subscribers link their NIN with their SIM cards. The NCC explains that at the end of the review meeting yesterday, the Technical Implementation Committee under the Ministerial Task Force reported significant progress in the ongoing linkage exercise. The mobile operators are said to have collected the numbers at an average of 3 to 4 SIMs per subscriber, and the implication is that millions will be linked up before the deadline in February 2021. Let's take another look at our lead story, talking about the acquisition of vaccines, storage capacity and vaccination of the citizens here in Nigeria. Joining us live from Abuja is the Executive Director of the National Primary Healthcare Development Agency, Dr. Faisal Shuaibu. Thanks a lot for joining us on the News at 10.
Thank you for having me.
We've looked at the efforts that you've made to give assurances that the facility is there to store the vaccines when they arrive. But others are talking about electricity in this country, and perhaps are we able to withstand that with the vaccines now when they arrive? Will it be able to withstand the kind of power supply we have here?
Vaccines are an item of national security. So aside from the COVID-19 vaccines that we're expecting, Nigeria has always stored routine immunization vaccines in our strategic stores. We have stores in the zones and also in the states. So these are institutions that are given priority when it comes to making sure that they are connected to the national grid and there is backup supply of power. So we do not compromise when it comes to the issue of making sure that there is electricity supplied to these vaccines. Because if we do not keep these vaccines at the right temperature, then they lose their potency.
This is not a routine vaccine. Yes, we've talked about the fact that there is electricity for routine immunization, but the temperatures we're talking about for the COVID-19 vaccines are quite different, and perhaps that's what the worry is all about. You heard Gloria talk about 2 minutes in terms of when the facility is opened. What is the plan for getting people trained to manage it, even when the vaccines arrive?
So I make a comparison to the routine immunization vaccines because this ultra cold chain equipment, the Pfizer vaccine that will be coming, also require a cold chain. It's just that the cold chain requirement is much lower than what we're used to with routine immunization vaccines. So minus 70 degrees Celsius, but they're going to be kept in the same environment. That is to say, the power will be sufficient to make sure that the vaccines are kept at the right temperatures. And we have already trained our health workers on how to manage and maintain the ultra cold chain equipment. So we do not foresee any challenges with making sure that this equipment are kept functional. As you showed in your report, these vaccines are going to be kept at even minus 80 degrees Celsius, just to make sure that we have the right environment. So training has been done, and we'll continue to train folks at the subnational level, so at the state level, at the local government level, to be able to manage these particular types of vaccine. It is part of the comprehensive vaccine deployment plan that we have developed and will be rolling out in the next couple of days.
Yes, I'll come back to my question on the plan for distribution. For some other countries, they're talking about starting with healthcare workers, the elderly. How will this vaccine be distributed across the country when it's rolled out, bearing in mind the temperature?
Our priority is going to be making sure that the frontline health workers, the support staff, frontline workers, first responders, strategic leadership, people who have comorbidities, that have diseases in addition to COVID-19, the elderly. Those are the people that we're going to prioritize. And in deciding the quantities of vaccines that go to the different states, clearly we have to look at the epidemiology. Where exactly do we have the hotspots? Where is the disease occurring? Which are the LGAs that need to be focused on? And then where are these health workers? The health workers that we have are the heroes of the COVID-19 outbreak in Nigeria. This is why they are the ones that we're going to be prioritizing to make sure that when they come in contact with the patients that have COVID-19, that they are protected. So they will be the priority when we get the first doses of COVID-19, which really is a drop in the ocean compared to exactly what we need in Nigeria. 100,000 doses doesn't even go far enough.
And just to find out quickly now, looking at the topography of our nation, do we have the cold trucks that are going to transport these vaccines around different parts of the country, refrigerators, etc., mobile trucks as well, that are cooled, bearing in mind the kind of temperatures we're talking about?
We're working with the private sector to make sure that just as we've been able to transport routine immunization vaccines over the last few decades without any hitches, we have those trucks that are on ground that will be transporting the vaccines to the states, to the local government areas and the health facilities. But particularly for the COVID-19 vaccines, we need to transport them with dry ice, which is frozen carbon dioxide. The private sector will be providing us with this dry ice. Now, what we've been told by Pfizer is that we'll be able to keep these COVID-19 vaccines outside of the ultra-cold chain for up to 5 days. Now, with the dry ice, we've been able to collaborate with the private sector, and the dry ice will make it possible for us to take these vaccines outside of the ultra-cold chain to where they are required. But I want to make it very clear that we are not planning to invest heavily in ultra-cold chain equipment. We're not planning to invest heavily in the Pfizer type of vaccines, because there are other vaccines like the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccines, which can be kept at +2 to +8 degrees Celsius, which is really the temperatures that most of our cold chain equipment can keep vaccines. So that is where we're really focused on. But for now, this is what we have. This is what we're getting from the COVAX facilities. And we need our health workers to be protected. That is why we've invested in this ultra-cold chain equipment, to make sure that our health workers are protected, so that we'll cut down on the numbers of health workers that are getting sick and are dying. But really, our focus will be on those types of vaccines that are amenable to the types of equipment that we have, those types of vaccines that our health workers are already used to managing. And this is what we've sort of communicated to the COVAX facility, and in our conversations with the different manufacturers, this will be our priority.
All right, Executive Director of the National Primary Healthcare Development Agency, Dr. Faisal Shuaibu, thank you for joining us on the News at 10 tonight.
Thank you for having me.
The Lagos State Judicial Panel on Restitution for Victims of SARS and other related matters continued its sitting today as it entertained the petition from a complainant, Austin Adebayo, against the Nigerian police. The petitioner, who is an online representative of a travel agency, gave an account on how he was wrongly accused of defrauding a woman, detained and then tortured by the police.
And they said, I told them I wanted to travel in the next few hours, because this was happening around 1:20 to 1:25 a.m. So they started lifting up my clothes one after the other, and the money fell down. You know, it's like 100K, 100,000. That's raps. So they now picked up the whole 700,000. They handcuffed me. I was still asking them, who are you people? What is my offense? So they told me, they handcuffed me, they pulled me out. I was surprised. I was saying, God, please help me, because I don't know what was going on. But my mind said to me, these are kidnappers. So they didn't tell me, or maybe where they're from or whatever, until we got to a place they call Adeniji Adele. Is in Victoria Island. So when we got there, I now knew that it was a police station. They say it's Federal SARS, Adeniji Adele.
When the News at 10 returns, non-oil tax revenue beats expectation as the Federal Inland Revenue Service meets 98% of its target in 2020. And that will be on business. Do join us again. Welcome back to the News at 10. 24 hours after the governor of Ondo State, Rotimi Akeredolu, directed herdsmen to vacate forest reserves in the state within 7 days, the federal government has countered that order. The president's spokesperson, Garba Shehu, in a statement, says Mr. Akeredolu, a senior lawyer will be the least expected to unilaterally expel thousands of herders who have lived all their lives in the state on account of the infiltration of the forests by criminals. In his words, Governor Rotimi Akeredolu, a seasoned lawyer, senior advocate of Nigeria, and indeed a former president of the Nigerian Bar Association, has fought crime in his state with passion and commitment, greater sensitivity and compassion for the 4 years which he has run the affairs, and in our view, will be the least expected to unilaterally oust thousands of herders who have lived all their lives in the state on account of the infiltration of the forests by criminals. The statement adds that kidnapping, banditry and rustling are crimes, no matter the motive or who is involved. But to define crime from the template, as a number of commentators have erroneously done, which group they belong to, the language they speak, their geographical location or their faith, is cruel. Let's cross over to Abuja now, and here's Terry Ikumi. Hi, Terry.
Hello, Ijoma. Welcome to Abuja. We begin on a rather sad note. 3 people have died after a fuel tanker exploded on Ibrahim Babangida Boulevard in Abeokuta, the Ogun state capital. According to eyewitness account, the fuel-laden tanker fell and emptied its contents after a brake failure, leaving 5 vehicles and 1 motorcycle burnt. It took the intervention of the state fire service, men of the civil defense and other security operatives to put out the fire.
An unusual scene on the Ibrahim Babangida Boulevard, outbound Abeokuta, the Ogun state capital. This petrol tanker loses control, ramming into other vehicles in its way before going up in flames. Eyewitnesses gather, but are not able to do much until firefighters come to the rescue. 3 people die on the spot after 5 vehicles and a motorcycle are caught up in the inferno.
As we are coming, we saw that petrol tanker. The brake is already failed. As we saw the car, you don't know anything to do. You just park away. You just see the light.
And we had boom. We thought it was gunshot or something like that. By the time all of us want to run outside, we discovered that it was petrol tanker. All of us run out from the bank to see what is going on. We now discover that the light is exploded already.
Those who did survive are receiving treatment in a hospital.
The state is aware that incidents like this nature will always happen, and we are always on top of it in the procurement of equipment and even fire tenders. So we will wait for the report from the necessary agency, police, trace, the fire services men, before we will be able to make appropriate response. If people are in various hospitals now at our own expense, so we are already assisting, and all the government officers, even the governor is monitoring the situation here now through me. Likewise, the deputy governor and all other top government officials. At the end of the day, when we get the report, we will react appropriately.
The accident seems to be an eye-opener for the state's emergency management services, as government officials hope for a better and more timely response to emergencies of this nature in future.
Meanwhile, the state governor, Dr. Abiodun, says the state is taking full responsibility and care for the medical treatment of those who sustained various degrees of injuries in the incident. He made the promise while assessing the level of destruction caused by the inferno, as he confirmed that 6 persons were injured in the fire. He also vowed to ensure strict enforcement of roadworthiness rules by articulated vehicles plying the roads in the state.
We will begin the enforcement, the serious enforcement of ensuring tankers and tanker drivers operate vehicles in Ogun State that are roadworthy. They will now begin to check those vehicles to ensure and confirm when last were they maintained, do they have the adequate safety equipment, how well are they mechanically operating. Because this is not the first time we're experiencing this in Ogun State. We see a lot of this happening in the Otta axis. There's a bridge in Otta that always has this kind of incident. We are also going to put measures in place to try and reduce or almost eliminate this such occurrence. Part of that, amongst others, will include ensuring that tanker drivers do not drive on our overhead bridges anymore.
There has also been a fire incident in Sokoto State, this time at the Shehu Shagari Modern Market, where officials of the federal and state fire services in the state and the National Emergency Management Agency worked to put out the inferno, which occurred earlier today. The cause of the inferno is not yet known, but some traders said it started from the stall of dealers trading in plastic bowls and other plastic materials. Meanwhile, Governor Aminu Tambuwal has announced the setting up of a panel of inquiry by the state government aimed at unraveling the immediate and remote causes of the incident. He said this while assessing the extent of damage. The governor expressed sadness over the huge financial loss incurred by traders as a result of the fire outbreak.
We appeal to the general public, and particularly those who are owners of shops and having investments in this market, to remain calm as we are doing everything humanly possible to bring it under control. We must not do anything that will give opportunity to hoodlums to go into the market and take advantage of this unfortunate situation and help themselves with people's assets. So I am appealing that we should continue to pray as we are doing our best to bring it under control. We have marshaled all the serviceable firefighting equipment that are in the capital. The government of Sokoto State is hereby constituting a committee under the leadership of the Deputy Governor. We are tasking them with the responsibility of not only bringing this under control, but also taking stock of losses suffered, and so that government can now see how it can come in to support our citizens that have lost valuables and their properties in this inferno.
Back here in Abuja, President Muhammadu Buhari has played host to the President of the Republic of Benin, Patrice Talon, at the State House in Abuja, where he emphasized the importance of good neighborliness for the growth of the two countries. He reminded his guest that when he assumed office in 2015, one of the very first steps he took was to visit neighboring countries like Chad, Niger, Cameroon and Benin to forge a common understanding on crucial issues including security, trade and development. President Talon, on his part, said his visit to Nigeria is a show of gratitude to President Buhari for his robust leadership which he has displayed in Africa and in Nigeria. He explains that the challenges of 2020 were huge, hence the need to ensure that the relationship between both countries remains cordial. Both leaders agreed that the survival of each other is in the interest of everyone. To other stories now, Vice Presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party in the 2019 President General election, Mr. Peter Obi, has added his voice to the condemnation trailing the murder of IT engineer David Ntekim Rex, who was killed by armed robbers in the Jibo area of Lagos a few days ago. The 22-year-old was reportedly attacked by robbers on his way from work, and in the ensuing scuffle was shot at close range. His family, however, says he could have been saved if the police had given him prompt medical attention. Mr. Obi, who took to his Twitter handle today, blamed his death on the security situation in the country and also faulted the delay in giving him the necessary medical attention. His tweet reads in part, "David, and indeed any other citizen, does not deserve this untimely death because the Compulsory Treatment and Care for Victims of Gunshot Act 2017 makes their treatment lawful. I urge governments and institutions at all levels to urgently direct that gunshot patients be treated without police report in line with our laws. The hospitals can inform the police of such a patient while he or she is undergoing treatment." Well, that's it from Abuja. Over to Anne Ondo for business news.
Thank you, Terry. Welcome to Business News. The non-oil tax collected by the Federal Inland Revenue Service last year was 109%, and that figure is 9% higher than the amount collected in 2019. That's according to the FIRS chairman, Mohammed Nami. He says the Revenue Regulatory Agency achieved approximately 98% of the national tax target of 5.06 trillion naira set by the federal government. The FIRS boss also mentions that a total of 4.9 trillion naira was generated by the Federal Inland Revenue Service in the year 2020. The International Energy Agency has trimmed its 2021 global oil demand forecast, stating that world oil demand is projected to recover by 5.5 million barrels per day, and that's to about 96.6 million this year. The IEA's latest oil market report says the downward revision of 0.3 million barrels from last month's assessment is due to the continuous uprise in COVID-19 cases and renewed lockdown measures that will further limit mobility. The Paris-based energy agency says it expects oil demand growth to fall slightly to 94.1 million barrels per day in the first quarter of this year, as tougher government plans will lead to additional travel restrictions. And despite recording a positive market breadth, the local equities market has already ended today's trading session slightly red. Total volume of equities transacted today dropped by 28.91%. Teniola Shibowale has the details.
Hello and welcome to the Stock Market Report. The negative performance, which started off the third trading week of January at the NYSC, entered a second day today as investors extended profit taking on some high value and mid-cap equities. After waking from hibernation on Monday, the bear extended its grip on the shares of blue-chip equities such as Boa Cement, Adova, Access Bank and UBA, which resulted in the drop on their sectoral index. As a result, the market's main index fell further by a moderate 0.07%, but still managed to remain within the 41,000 level, while an additional 16 billion naira is knocked off from the equities capitalization. Despite the loss recorded in today's trading session, which comes amid a positive margin of 43 gainers against 21 losers, traders say there is no need to panic as the market is just reacting to mild profit-taking activities by investors. Well, let's take a look at the activity chart. Total volume of shares traded today was satisfactory at more than 525 million units, but this is lower by about 20% against the turnover recorded on Monday. Today's trading session may have turned out to be in the red, but traders are still optimistic for a rebound in the upcoming sessions later in the week. And that's the Stock Market Report. I'm Teniola Shibowale.
Well, we told you earlier about the non-oil tax collected by the Federal Inland Revenue Service. Last year, it was 109%, and that's the figure. It's higher than the amount collected in 2019. The FIRS boss mentioned that a total of 4.9 trillion naira was generated by the FIRS for the year 2020.
For the first time in recent memory, non-oil tax revenue accounted for almost 70% of contribution to Federation account. This means that the service collected 109% of non-oil revenue in 2020, which is 9% higher than the previous years. In other words, the oil which used to contribute over 50% in tax returns through the petroleum profits tax in previous years accounted for only 30.6% contribution to the tax revenue generated by Federal Inland Revenue in the year 2020. And so, gentlemen of the press, the FIRS collected 4 trillion 952 billion 243 million 711,728 naira 37 kobo in total tax revenue in the year 2020.
And that's Business News Tonight. Thank you for watching. I'm Anne Nwaodo. The rest of the news at 10 continues with Ijoma.
Thanks a lot, Anne. The founder of FCMB Group and Otumba Tunashe Foundation, Otumba Olashobabi Balogun, has formally handed over the Otumba Tunashe Paediatric Center, Ijebu-Ode, to the university and the University College Hospital as a gift. At the ceremony held at the hospital premises in Ijebu-Ode, the group chief executive and chairman of the board of Otumba Tunashe Foundation, Mr. Ladi Balogun, says the gesture will raise the bar in catering for children's health care in Nigeria and beyond.
Something significant is happening at this venue. It's about health development, it's about children's health care, all wrapped in philanthropy. Conceived and embarked on 11 years ago by the Grand Master of Banking in Nigeria, as is proudly referred to, and founder of the FCMB Group, Otumba Dr. Olushobomi Balogun, the Otumba Tunashe National Paediatric Center, Ijebu-Ode, was his response to the plight of sick children and high demand for world-class medical facility. Today, he's letting go of this 5 billion naira worth of facility and everything on this ground. He's donating all to the University of Ibadan and the University College Hospital to carry on the baton.
On the CMD's left.
This event is just a formal handover ceremony.
The inspiration by Otumba Balogun to build this great establishment was first inspired when he took over the Children's Hospital at UCH Ibadan.
Otumba Shobomi Balogun, the University College Hospital and the University of Ibadan have a long history of connection and partnership. This looks like a crowning.
Many years ago, he endowed the Otumba Tunashe Children Emergency Ward, OTC, at the University College Hospital, Ibadan, under the leadership of late Professor Olakawura, who was CMD then. And he has been funding the ward since then. A lot of children have been saved, while training and research in pediatrics have been going on unhindered.
It resonates further as the provost adds her voice.
UCH has so many hospitals around that are doing excellently well. And that is how it operates in many developed parts of the world. You have a complex of hospitals. And this is also, by the grace of God, going to be transformed into the very best you could have.
The future is already here for the university as it plans expansion.
We are going to start with the pediatrics department and escalate to obstetrics and gynecology, then medicine and surgery. It's going to be a total package at the end of the day, but we want to live one day at a time.
Otumba Balogun is no stranger to philanthropy, traceable to education, capacity building, youth empowerment and socioeconomic initiatives. The handover today is regarded as the latest, with the potential of changing for good the healthcare of children in Nigeria and beyond.
Let's turn our attention to the United States now, where the President-elect Joe Biden has given his final address in the state of Delaware before leaving on a private aircraft for Washington, D.C., where he and Kamala Harris will be sworn in as president and vice president. In his address, an emotional Joe Biden thanked the state for opportunities given him and his family.
Good evening and welcome to the Channel Studios here in London with your international news around the world in 5. US President-elect Joe Biden has moved to dismiss a new White House decree on COVID travel rules as Donald Trump enters his final full day in office. In one of his last orders, Mr. Trump tried to end travel bans for visitors from much of Europe and Brazil. Mr. Biden's spokeswoman said now was not the time to be easing travel measures. Joe Biden will take office at around midday on Wednesday, although much of the spotlight is on Mr. Trump's final moves, including potential presidential pardons. Security is intense in Washington, D.C. ahead of the inauguration ceremony. Thousands of National Guard Reserve soldiers have been deployed in the wake of the storming of the Capitol building by a pro-Trump mob on January the 6th that left 5 people dead. The FBI had earlier warned of possible protests across the nation by right-wing extremists emboldened by the invasion of the Capitol. Hundreds of youths have clashed with police in cities across Tunisia, throwing stones and gasoline bombs in the capital as security forces used tear gas and water cannon to try to quell the unrest. Protests erupted a day after the 10-year anniversary of a revolution that was sparked when a fruit seller set himself on fire in 2011 and inspired a wave of revolts across North Africa and the Middle East. Anger has been brewing in recent years at joblessness and poor state services. Around 300 young men confronted police in the capital, and violence followed in several Tunisian cities. Prime Minister Hichem Mechichi has named 12 new ministers in a cabinet reshuffle in an effort to inject new blood into the government amid the rising political tensions. Central Africa Republic's Supreme Court has confirmed the re-election of President Faustin Archange Touadéra, rejecting the complaints of his rivals as the government fends off a rebel offensive. 10 of the incumbent's challengers had argued the election should be rerun, citing low turnout due to violence that has raged in the weeks before and after the December the 27th poll. They also alleged voting irregularities. Outside the court confirming the result of the elections, Mr. Touadéra said the outcome defied those who thought violence and intimidation would stop the people from exercising their duty. Eyewitness videos show houses burned to the ground and one still on fire in Sudan's West Darfur, following a militia attack over the weekend that left at least 129 people dead and 198 wounded. Videos showed multiple houses burned and charred debris. The attacks followed a fight reported by local organizations and residents, in which a member of the Masalit tribe killed a man from an Arab tribe. After the attacks, Sudan's defense minister said military reinforcements were being sent to the city. Mount Etna in Italy, Europe's tallest and most active volcano, has erupted once again. Long streams of red-hot lava could be seen flowing down the slopes of the 3,330-metre-high volcano. Etna is the continent's most active volcano and can burst into action several times a year. However, it rarely causes damage and is believed to have the longest written record of eruptions, more than any other volcano. And finally, an unusual scene in the Sahara Desert: snow on its dunes. Ice and snow were seen on desert sands in Ain Sefra in Algeria, as temperatures in the small town reached 3 degrees. The town has experienced snow only 3 other times in 42 years, 2 of those in the past 5 years. 2017 also saw a blizzard dumping snow up to 1 metre thick in the very same region. And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the Channel Studios in Lagos.
Thank you, Simon. Welcome to Sports News. We begin with football. Bayern Munich will face either Qatar's Al Duhail or Egypt's Al Ahly in the FIFA Club World Cup semi-final on February the 8th. The competition's draw took place earlier today in Zurich. Al Duhail secured their qualification as host by winning the Qatar Stars League in 2019 to 2020. Egyptian giants Al Ahly, now African club football's biggest prize in November, and qualified for the Club World Cup for the 6th time, having last appeared in 2013, which was also Bayern's only previous appearance. Al Duhail received a walkover into the second round after Auckland City, who had been nominated as Oceania's representative, pulled out due to coronavirus quarantine measures implemented by the authorities in their native New Zealand. Barcelona will appeal Lionel Messi's 2-match ban following his red card in the Super Cup final defeat to Athletic Bilbao. Messi was dismissed in the 121st minute of Sunday's game as he took a swing at one of the players in an off-the-ball incident that was spotted by VAR. It was the first time Messi had ever been sent off for the club and only the 3rd red in his entire 17-year career for Barca and Argentina. Barca lost that match 3-2 in Seville, and a ruling by the Royal Spanish Football Federation Competition Committee earlier deemed Messi's offence serious enough to warrant a 2-match suspension. That will rule him out of the Copa del Rey match against Cornellà on Thursday and Sunday's La Liga trip. That's sports news. Ijoma, back to you.
Thanks, Olumide. And the main news again. The federal government today gave the assurance that it has the facility with adequate storage capacity to receive up to 400,000 doses of COVID-19 vaccines. That's the news at 10 tonight. Thanks for staying with us. I'm Ijoma Wenyato. Good night.